Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to an all-new episode of TAETRO Talks. Happy Tuesday, whether it's Tuesday morning like it is for me or Tuesday afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Maybe for some of you, it's even Wednesday already. I don't really know how this whole time zone situation works. But hey, welcome, everybody. I see some folks in the chat already. Thank you for tuning in today. We have a really cool guest. Can't wait to get into the interview. It's been a while since we did an interview. We've been doing call-in shows the past few weeks. So this should be a nice, fresh change of pace to hear from a artist, somebody who's been working in the industry as a producer, as a Ableton push aficionado, I would say. But we'll get into that in a moment. Let's do some housekeeping off the top, first of all. Well, I'll say hello to everybody who's in chat first. Enigmatic Onion, first of all, shout out to all the members. What's going on? Jamie89, thank you for the kind words. Thank you. I'm glad you guys enjoyed the video that went up today, the live performance. That was a lot of fun to shoot. SDK, what's up? Maya and Max Music, hello. Mom and Dad are in the chat, of course. Kalana, what's going on? Ravi Sankar, what's up? 72Y. Orbit is here. Ro is here. Mr. Nobody, what's up? Misha, what's going on? What camera am I filming with right now? Lumix GH5. Thanks for asking. We could throw some background music on. It doesn't have to be so quiet. But hey, thank you all for tuning in today. If you all did watch the video that went up today, thank you. It's a live performance. If you haven't watched it yet, you should check that out. What am I here to tell you? Well, first of all, we're brought to you by 343 Labs, which is an electronic music school in New York, Berlin, and online. So we got all of our course selection online, as well as, as things start to go back to normal, we might even be able to do some in-person classes. I know we're especially looking towards the summer for the full immersive classes. If you are able to travel or do some in-person classes, something to think about. We are live pretty much every single day on 343 TV. That's over at youtube.com/343labs. So if you're watching over there, hello, thank you. If you're watching here on my channel, please open a new tab, youtube.com/343labs, and click subscribe. Subscribe to that channel as well, because we're on our road to 10,000 subscribers. Very, very close there. And there's lots of other shows that happen on that channel that are not just me, but are a lot of other great Ableton certified trainers, people who have touring experience, beatport charting producers, all kinds of great educators on there teaching different things about music production every single day. So head over there, make sure you subscribe. The other thing that I will say, and it doesn't seem like ReStreamBot is in the chat. So Thomas from 343 Labs, just to give you a heads up on that. But I'm monitoring my chat on my channel. And Thomas is going to be dropping a link to the 343 Labs beat battle that's happening on Thursday. Or not, it's not happening on Thursday, but the deadline is Thursday to enter. So if you are interested in entering a beat battle, somebody from 343 Labs will be in the chat dropping a link so that you can enter that. So you still have a few days if you are interested. And it's sponsored by Arturia, so that's cool. Some Arturia prizes involved. Yes, Maya and Max Music says it's the truth that TAETRO is a MIDI controller freak. That's true. Maya and Max, yes. Hey, what's going on, Jared? Thank you for joining. Dento in the house. What's up? Okay, so I guess we should start to get into the interview because we're already 5 minutes in. Hello, Spinning Orange. Hello. As usual, if you have questions for the guest or questions that pop up along the way, if they're relevant to the conversation, I'll do my best to weave them in. So please, along with the conversation in the interview today, drop them in the chat. And I'll be keeping an eye on that as well as trying to do the interview at the same time. But today we have a great guest that I mentioned before, beat producer, epic push performer. I first became aware of his work in 2015 when Ableton did a profile on him and was kind of blown away by his work and what he does. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and cut to a quick clip so you can check out our guest, JNTHN Stein. Check him out. JNTHN Stein, welcome to the show.
Hey, TAETRO. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it, man. Happy to be
Thanks,
here.
thanks for taking the time and coming on the show today. Everybody was just watching one of your lo-fi performances on Push, and the crowd looks pretty excited about it. SDK is like, I could never play chords like that using the Push. Jared Rice is so sick. Everybody's like lighting up about this performance. Is so dope. And I want to get into all that about you, how you came to be able to play Push like that, because I feel like such a noob when I watch your performances and stuff. But that's later. For now, let's do like a quick intro. Like maybe you do a lot of things, like you're a performer, you're a producer, you have an artist project, a new artist project coming out. I want to know, like, how do you define what you do when people ask you, like, hey, what do you do? Like, what do you tell them?
That's a very good question. Let's see. I don't know if I have the perfect answer for that yet.
There's no perfect answer, I think, to that question.
Okay, that's good to know we're on the same page there. I consider myself a very eclectic artist. I've always been into a lot of different things, even just as a musician, being into a lot of different styles. When I grew up, I was into jazz and classical music, and later somebody gave me a cracked copy of Ableton 8 and started getting into beat making.
Nice.
And I've I'm learning I've learned a bunch of instruments. My first instrument was clarinet, and then I started learning bass and guitar, and later Push fell into my lap and I started getting into that. So and now I'm getting into even things beyond the musical scope. So I would say I am a eclectic um and expressive artist that is driven above all by curiosity in what can be done and what could be expressed with the human body, the human mind, the human spirit, with any instrument that is external, like a musical instrument, or your
Sure.
body or your voice. And along the way, it's led to me learning instruments like guitar and bass and Push and drums
Yeah.
and I'm sure this is just the beginning, but it's creativity driven by curiosity and a need to express.
That's awesome. I said there's not a perfect answer, but that was a pretty good one. That was pretty close.
It came out better than I thought.
I wonder, you tracked back to like early days, like say starting on clarinet or whatever. Like, did you come from a
Yeah.
musical family, or like did music just call to you? Like, how did you just even end up discovering that maybe you would become a musician?
Yeah, well, I'm very blessed to have a very artistic family. My mom is a visual artist. She paints, she makes quilts, pottery, draws, plays piano really well too. And my dad is a musician too. He's an amazing pianist and composer and music director. So yeah, I grew up with very artistic vibes in the household and a lot of encouragement to play around with that from the beginning, and especially as I got a little older and started to take serious interest in it, and yeah, they always pushed me in a really nice way, and I've learned a lot from my dad as a musician too, and was able to hang out around really great musicians that he was playing with and hanging with as a kid, and had awesome mentors too.
Yeah.
So yeah, but before I played clarinet, I started, it was just band class
Yeah.
in middle school, and before I played music, I was really into sports. I played a lot of baseball, and
Interesting.
but there was I think, oh, and skateboarding too. I was really into skateboarding, and I think I dislocated my finger when I was 13, and so I couldn't play baseball or skateboard, and I couldn't even play clarinet either. But in band class, there was this bass lying around in the back room, and I had a splint on my second finger, but I was able to play one finger bass lines with my first finger.
Nice.
And the first bass line I learned was Seven Nation Army.
Of
Was
course, the
yeah,
classic
that's a
first
great.
baseline.
Yeah, and I don't know why that story just came up just now, but it's one that I never ever forget. I mean, probably because of the importance of it leading to music being such a big part of my life now and big passion. But it came from this super random, childish, accidental moment of me literally injuring myself and being in this band class, and this, old $100 bass with 3 strings was just lying back there, and my one good finger, and that song having just come out, which was awesome,
Right.
and leading to everything now.
I think a lot about that, like origin story. Like that's a perfect origin story, I think, because it's like these set of circumstances. Like finger had to be broken, bass had to be present, that song
Yeah,
coming out, like all those things had to come together, and it probably set forth this chain of events for you. That's like you probably can't even, like when you were sitting there learning out on the bass, you definitely couldn't have imagined like what the spark that ignited was, you know. But
oh, there's no way.
that's
There's
so
no way to
crazy.
ever imagine that.
Right. And I think that's important for folks like people in the chat, like embrace those moments that feel like maybe insignificant at the time, or maybe a struggle at the time, but they can
Yeah,
really lead to a lot, like a long road of being a musician, you know, and it all starts somewhere.
yes.
That's epic. So like I feel like being from a musical family can go one of two ways. Like it can be like a supportive, like you have access to the resources and the people, like you said,
Yeah,
or it can be like a little bit of pressure because it's like they know what standard. Like I don't come from like my parents are not musicians,
yes,
so they couldn't pressure me the same way like I could imagine like if I had a musician like parent that knows, you know, oh, you should
yeah.
be practicing like for 3 hours a day, like whatever, that kind of thing. So like was it ever a tough time with that, or were they like pretty chill about it? Like were they good letting you kind of go your own way?
Yeah, well, I think they were lucky in that I, got hooked very early on, and got really, really into practicing, basically, once I started playing bass, so there was never any instances of, them having to push me
Discipline.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was always very, very self-driven, and still consider myself that way today, although, like, I'm a little better at chilling now, which is good.
Yeah.
But, I do remember you introducing that idea just now, the standards thing for sure, my parents, being very smart and tasteful people who know what's up with music and art in general, especially my mom who, um, I relate to a lot now as someone who's made a life out of being artistic and expressive and just, sensitive, someone who's open to feel a wide range of emotions, so that which is a huge the biggest part of being an artist. You have to be able to feel so that you could make others feel. But, so I on one end, I've learned a lot from them on that, but then there are times where it's a lot of pressure and intimidating, and even today, it makes me feel like, um, it makes me l feel like I need to make music of a certain depth and quality, and
Sure.
not just like, a David Guetta, like, house banger or
Right.
something, which I guess I don't even mean that
With
to
peace and love to David Guetta, of course.
yeah, most definitely, yeah, it'd just be something that I think I would be bad at because of how I've been artistically driven, like, I don't have that aesthetic down for that reason. But,
Right.
I do remember this, one time maybe when I was in, I don't know, 14 or something, and, I was playing in my first band with 2 of my buddies at school, and, they came over to practice, and my dad walked in, and he got really critical of the guitar tone of the guitarist. He, like, came over and he's like, "Oh, what's going on? This is way too bright." And he, like, went over and tweaked with his overdrive pedal, and and then it was probably super weird, I was too young at the time, but later after he left, he basically he said like, "Oh, you need to be playing with better musicians, you need to
Right.
be playing at a higher level," and it was this wake up moment where, something at the time which just seemed like really just me hanging out with my friends to, oh, I've I have,
You have a standard to uphold
a
in this
standard to
family.
uphold. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know the intention of it was you have a responsibility to yourself and your talent and your love for what you do to surround yourself with like-minded people and people that are on the level,
Right.
and,
But
I
at some
think
level, you just want to chill with your friends too, you
but then
know?
there's that too,
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, and now, now that I'm older and, I have I guess I've done the work to be able to work with great artists and fulfill that, now I feel like I have a lot more privilege and liberty to do a little bit of both,
Yeah, of
just
course.
I get to just hang out with the people I wanna hang out with and not take things so seriously and
Totally.
kinda go back to just, playing in dumb bands with your friends, but and also just have moments where you make, you make the type of art that you want, and I
Exactly.
think I think ideally that's the spot we all wanna get to, we don't wanna take ourselves too seriously or,
Totally. Like
uh
sometimes it's just an outlet, and then sometimes it's like creative expression. You're actually forming the art that you, like you said, the art that you want to make. And sometimes it's a Venn diagram. Sometimes it's in between those things, but
Yeah,
it can exist in either space or both at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think yeah, it's good to be comfortable with both, and I don't know, I think at the end, yeah, my parents did a great job with that because like, they were just super encouraging and made a great space for me and showed me what's up, introduced me to a lot of music and,
Yeah.
um,
That's
the
great.
rest, like, I just took it from there.
Yeah, so speaking of taking it from there, so like it sounds like you have that very, traditional background, like bass, clarinet, like playing in bands and stuff, musical family. Like, are you at this time when you're like a teenager and beyond, like are you noticing production on records? Like, are you getting into any kind of music production at all? Or like when does that spark ignite?
Yeah, the first time I got into production, I was 20. It was after my 2nd year at music school. I went to Manhattan School of Music for college, and
Nice.
that was in New York, and I was studying bass there, just trying to get really good at bass, basically, and,
Now, was it when before we get too into the music production, was the idea like you were going to become like a session bass player, or you were just going to be like a bass artist, or like what was the plan? Like just get really good at bass and
yeah, that was a great question. I knew the plan was gonna be a lot looser than what I had, what the focus point was, 'cause I already knew I was, pretty out there and into a lot of different things, but at the time, I was studying classical bass, and I was kinda lining myself up to get some sort of orchestra job.
wow,
Yeah, which is crazy, crazy to think about now, because 'cause I've just taken such a detour from that in
for
every
sure,
sense. I
yeah,
mean, and have gone so, so far away from the insanely, structural, rigid hierarchy of the orchestral world,
yeah,
where I mean, well, on the trade-off is, all nothing but respect to that scene and definitely to the music, which is a big inspiration to me to this day. But, basically, it's like it's almost like a it's pretty well, it's basically the most awesome day job you could have, especially if you're getting paid well to play amazing music at a high level. But, it's like you show up and then there's this dude that outranks this dude, that outranks this dude, that outranks this
right,
dude. Everybody is run by the conductor, and you kinda just fall in and you play those notes exactly like everybody else, and so there's an amazing skill and selflessness to it, but as someone who pretty much from the beginning, when I started playing bass even, was really into, improvisation and composition and
yeah,
the more, I guess, left brain creative side, I think I always knew in the back of my mind that wasn't really gonna work out, but,
totally,
it was just a curiosity I had and, just a challenge I wanted to take on and see if I could do it and also just learn more about making the bass sound good,
yeah.
because that's really pushing that to, uh to its highest possibility, playing with the bow and being expressive with every single note, and, you're playing this giant thing that's, like, bigger than you, and it's a very physical instrument that requires, full body movements and is
An
very
extension of yourself at a certain point.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It's very visceral and just ultimately a beautiful sounding instrument when you start to really put your whole body into it. So, I was learning that and gaining a lot from it, but I always knew that, my heart was basically in composing and improvising, especially the flow state of music,
yeah.
which is my favorite. part of being an artist or even just being alive now, any instance of flow state. But so I guess all that leading up to sophomore year at music school, hanging out with other dope musicians, dudes that are practicing a lot, doing their thing. And my buddy, who was also a bass player, and I think also had a little bit of curiosity in electronic music, we were hanging, and he took my laptop and put in this little this little flash drive, and he loaded up a cracked copy of Ableton 8 on there.
It's so funny.
He was like, "Here, check this out, dude. It's pretty crazy. I've been playing with this. You might like it." And so whatever, I didn't think much of it, but at the same time, I had another friend who had just given, burnt it was probably like a MP3 CD with a whole bunch of music on it. And on this CD was a whole bunch of hip hop, which I was already curious about because I grew up in Oakland and there's a big hip hop culture there. And I
Of
was already
course.
kind of into local hip hop artists there, like Souls of Mischief and Del the Funky Homo Sapien and E40, these type dudes. And but this friend, his name was Toby. He gave me, tons and tons of albums of Jay Dilla and Dwelle and Tribe Called Quest and D'Angelo and De La Soul and Erykah Badu and all this music that I was basically destined to like, coming from a jazz music background and
That's what
hip
I was
hop.
gonna say. Like that seems like it was the perfect collection of music for you to get at that point in time because it
Yeah, dude.
fused these two worlds. Like one world that maybe is semi new to you and one world that you had been like fully immersed in. Like that sounds like a perfect collection of music for somebody that was where you were at that time.
Yeah. That's another, yeah, especially talking about it now, it's another one of those super, consequentially casual but very serendipitous moments, kind of like that Broken Finger, White Stripes moment where, I mean, this kid, I haven't talked to him in years, but at the time, that random act of him passing me this burnt CD had a big, big impact on my life as a whole. So
Amazing.
I got really into that music, and um, especially Jay Dilla, actually, but all of them really. And for the first time ever, I started paying attention to production, and I mean, just even having a basic fundamental awareness of it being a thing, not taking for granted the fact that there's okay, I mean, it's not just musicians recording themselves and layering. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of art and new nuance to that, and somebody's doing that, the way that you're playing the bass, somebody designed that record, and it seems so obvious now, especially now that producing is such a huge part of music making culture now, but at the time it wasn't, and definitely not for me, a kid that really likes jazz and classical music. It's not stuff you think about. But that moment I started to really become aware of that, and at the same moment, my friend passes me this copy of Ableton 8, which I start opening up for the first time and looking at all these, numbers and
Like
dials.
what the hell is this?
Yeah, exactly. No, it was yeah, I don't know what any of it was, but I mean, I was also at the time already really good at learning and teaching myself. I had already kind of experienced that with a few of the musical instruments I was already into at the time. So I just approached it the same way and kind of did the one dial at a time thing. Okay, like I remember double clicking on operator and pulling up my first operator, and I had a MIDI keyboard, so okay, so this is this really simple note, this is just a sine wave, and what does this knob do? Okay, that makes the note ring longer, and okay, this filter knob makes it darker and brighter, and you just go one knob at a time. You turn the knob all the way down to see what that extreme range does, and then you turn the knob all the way up and you see what that extreme does, and then you go halfway in between, and you kind of,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows this process that I'm describing here,
Well,
but
actually, it's interesting. I wouldn't underestimate because back then, like Live 8 days, there
yeah,
was not nearly as much as many resources out there. Like there wasn't a YouTube tutorial for everything, and if there was, like it was kind of like YouTube was not what it is now back
Oh,
then, you know? So like there were not tutorials on tutorials. So like I think a little bit of that gets lost because that's very similar to like my learning is like just open something up, turn the knobs, and see what they do, like one by one, and then that's how you learn. But I think now with the oversaturation of tutorials and educational content, everybody kind of expects their exact question to have been answered by the internet already. So I think
yeah,
people lose that experience a little bit. But I think that that is a very I think that's such an organic way to learn is just like by doing and trying and not really knowing what you're doing going in. So, but that's cool to hear.
that's true. Yeah, that reminds me a lot of times, people ask me, the best way to learn music theory or chords or harmony or composition. And, a lot of times they'll ask me like, oh, what do you think of this book? Have you read this book? And I basically just tell them the best way you could learn harmony and chords will definitely not happen from reading any book or even watching videos, although I guess that could help. It's the
You
best
learn the
way to do it
tunes.
is to pick up an instrument, a piano or a guitar, and just play.
Yeah.
You have to, yeah, you have to feel these chords. You have to try them for yourself. You have to make the connection between what you hear and your fingers pushing down on notes, all of that stuff. So, yeah,
Sort of like
no,
reading about push-ups is only so good. You got to actually do the push-ups.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I
That's
like that.
that's dope. So like you get Live 8, you start turning some knobs, like does it become a real thing right off the bat? Like you start recording yourself playing bass, you start making like cool beats like based on this like mixed tape that you just listened to? Like what is the trajectory from there?
Yeah, well, I don't think they were cool beats. I'm sure they were pretty rough, and it would be funny to find them. I know I have a hard drive in that drawer over there that probably has some of my first Ableton sessions,
It's
and
funny.
I'm sure some rainy day will come where I'll open them up and laugh at what I was doing. But, Skrillex had just come out with Scary Monsters that year too. I think it was 2010, and, that definitely hit me too, and probably was my first introduction to the super sound designy, synthesized,
Yeah.
electronic EDM
Well,
side, and
dubstep blowing up at that time, like huge.
exactly. Yeah, and EDM too, just as a whole for that matter. I mean, even, some of the like, someone like Deadmau5 or
Right.
Cascade. So that was the other side that kinda filled out this other side of my spectrum of brand new musical interests. On one end was all this, very earthy, cool, jazzy, dark hip hop stuff, which really connected with my jazz background and just being like a Oakland kid. And then this super fantastic, magical, sparkly, imaginative stuff like what Skrillex was doing and a couple other EDM dudes that I really liked that was just making very bright music in a good way.
Yeah.
So I remember the first beats I was trying to make, or even songs, because I tried some songwriting too, were leaning into both of those. I was really obsessed with trying to make, you know, probably everyone's, but trying to make the best dubstep wub, like
Totally.
hours just, drawing in the overtones and the operator and, like automating the LFO rate and just trying to even come close to what Skrillex was doing at the time and not at all remotely getting close to it, but, learning a lot about synthesis through it, and, I mean, I definitely remember nights where, on one end, I'm supposed to be at school and showing up to rehearsals and practicing for, rep classes and for my private lessons, but then I was also just so obsessed with Ableton because it was just super exciting brand new frontier and somehow had the foresight to at the time, with no reason to see where it's gonna go and being just, ignorant and not knowing what's up in all the ways, but somehow instinctively knowing that it was it was the next frontier and this way to not not replace the interests I already had, playing live instruments and the all the music that I loved that came before it, but a way to integrate it and be the next thing as a composer, someone who wants to write music, because you've got all these new sounds. You have synthesis and sound design and programming of all sorts, but you could also just plug in and hit record and record the things that you do in the real world. And unlike being a composer for a band or an orchestra where you write the sheet music and you get your boys together to play it. I mean, you're the dude. You can make that record sound exactly the way you want,
Right.
which is huge. So I recognized that, and for that reason, really leaned into it and became obsessed. So I mean, I definitely have memories of nights staying up till 6 a.m. Working on some stupid dubstep track, and waking up the next day super excited and probably pressing play and being like, "Oh damn, this still sounds."
The classic, the next morning,
Yeah.
listening to the mix, like,
Yeah. 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 Pro tip: the 6 a.m. mixes don't get any better, so better just get some sleep and try again fresh the next day. But yeah, I do remember, for whatever reason, just knowing that this was the next thing for me, and just for me. I mean, not for anybody else or everybody else, but I think I probably had a feeling about that too, because it felt too good to be true as someone who likes composing music. Like, this is it, man. This is the
yeah.
next thing.
It feels like it must have been so hard if that happened in like your sophomore year of college, you said, like you discovering Live 8. It must have been so hard to finish such a rigid program, like going through juries, like getting through all that in such a rigid curriculum that, the Manhattan School obviously probably has for the bass program, is what I would imagine.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever have trouble? Like, did you ever feel like maybe you wouldn't finish the program and you might go pursue something, or were you always like still set on like you were gonna finish it, you're gonna get the degree, you were gonna go down, still finish this like very different path than what was kind of sparking your inspiration through like production?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It definitely was hard. I mean, I always had the intention, at that point, I'd already done 2 years, and I figured, okay, I mean, I could do this. I could definitely finish it. But it definitely had a big effect on my performance and interest, and probably my demeanor at school. I remember that year, my junior year, my everything at school suffered a lot, and it was like a whole thing. My parents started to get a little worried because
Right.
I'm explaining to them, I'm like, "But mom, dad, Ableton's the next thing." And,
Yes.
they're like they're like, "Dude, what are you doing? You're, like, making beats on your computer? What is this?" But, you know, 10 years later now, it's like a way different story,
There
but
was
at
so
the
much
time.
less context at that time
Yeah,
for laptop like music production,
definitely. Yeah. But, once again, props to them for, like, despite clearly not understanding and understandably not approving, for them giving me the space to do my own thing and make my own decisions, even if they had the potential to be mistakes, which is great. I think that's very important as, a parent, a mentor, a teacher of any sort. So, but yeah, at the time, I mean, my junior year, I know that my performance and grades suffered, and, it got to the point where, yeah, I think, like, I don't know. I think, at the end of my junior year, I was put on some sort of probation, and, it wasn't looking great, but, it was just a wake-up call to just remind myself, "Okay, you have to do both, dude. You have to be responsible here." I mean, not just to yourself as a musician. Yes, you have this awesome new love, but you still have to nurture this path, which is also very beneficial from you, and you still have a lot to learn from the school and your friends there. And so, it was kind of a man up moment and do both. And my last year, I think I did a very, very good job of that, and took both as seriously as I can. I had a great last year at school and learned a lot, and put in a lot of effort and love to put on a great recital and play my best. And at the same time, dive deeper into Ableton, and I remember that same year I moved out to Brooklyn with my buddy Ivan, and we built a DIY recording studio in our basement there, off of the $11,000 we raised on Kickstarter, which is also crazy to think about. And it was cool. That was a great year because I was able to do both of those at the same time.
Tell me
I also
about.
remember,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I also remember when this first happened, going back before that year to, I guess, age 20, going on 21, and first getting into Ableton after my friend gave me that copy. I don't even think he expected me to get into it the way I did, to where it would start to become my main focus. And I do remember, there was, kids that, the musicians I was playing didn't understand, like my parents
Right.
didn't understand it, and they didn't get it. They were all incredible musicians pursuing this, I mean, basically a traditional path, but a purer path, their path. And, I'm like over here once again, pushing buttons basically, especially from their perspective. And I don't think they got it. And it definitely probably alienated me, at least for a little bit, until, maybe a year later, and they started to see what's up. But ultimately I was just doing what I felt was right, what I felt was the move. And in the end, it led to me making friends with other like-minded people at the school that were the same way, musicians that were playing their instrument at a high level, that were into composing and were into popular music, and, started to have an ear and awareness for beat making and music other than traditional art forms like jazz and classical.
Right.
And so I ended up making really good friends with those types, and we all got into Ableton around the same time. And, those dudes are still my friends to this day and collaborators.
That's great
So
because, back in that day, like, and even like while I was in college too, like it was still like an uphill battle to get people to understand like why you're spending so much time with your laptop and Ableton Live and making music this way. Like I feel
yeah.
like it's not even an argument anymore. Like people get it now, but back then if you could connect with people that really got it, like it definitely seems like those would be lasting relationships because you were all swimming upstream from what everybody else was saying was right or what was actual, like, music
Yeah,
education, whatever. So
yeah.
that's really cool. You just casually dropped that project you were talking about with the Kickstarter and like
Oh,
raising
yeah.
money and having that studio. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, of course. It's a cool story. Yeah, so, all these details I just dropped, me kinda going rogue basically, and in a sense, disavowing the tried and true path of the musician that a lot of my friends were doing, and, switching to pushing buttons on Ableton basically, um, led to the people I was connecting with changing. And next thing you know, I was making friends with some other like-minded people that had curiosity with that. A buddy of mine, Ivan in particular, and so we started hanging and just trying to figure out what was gonna be next for. I mean, I don't even think we had the scope to know what's next for music, but just about us in terms of just being dudes that like to make music and, wanna have a good hustle so we could do it, we could live
Yeah.
and live well. So, Ivan is, Ivan had a great mind for, uh, for business basically. And, we came up with this idea of, okay, so I was living in Harlem at the time, and I just bought my first 8-channel interface. It was the PreSonus one, and I had a couple mics already, and I was just starting to mess around with some live small band recordings just for fun. And I lived with a bunch of musicians, so we had a little baby grand or a upright piano down there in our basement, and drums because one of the roommates was a drummer. And I played bass, and there was a lot going on there. So I started just inviting musicians over and just recording kind of just casual live small jazz sessions with a couple musicians. And it was cool. I'm sure they didn't sound that great, but it was the beginnings of me learning how to work with live instruments, which I love doing now. And Ivan came over and saw that and was into it, or maybe we did a recording together. And so we came up with this idea. Okay, so we're at a music school with tons of great musicians, and they're all about to graduate, and their next thing is going to be, making recordings and demos, whether it's for their personal projects or, for, all the tons and tons of auditions and programs you could apply for. So let's be those dudes. Let's just record all of them.
Nice.
And so we started to really lean into that idea, and eventually it expanded to more than just the recording. It expanded to, like let's get some DSLRs and, do videos and take pictures too, and let's get good at producing and mixing and mastering and all that stuff, and just be the production house
That's
for
dope.
all
That's
the.
ambitious though.
It was very ambitious, yeah, but it's all good because we were like 22 and didn't know anything about anything, so you just have tons of swag through thinking that way.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, and the crazy part is we put on this Kickstarter and probably gave ourselves a couple months of deadline, and just hustled our asses off, just asking everybody at school, all the parents, grandparents, cousins, teachers, everybody. And yeah, some amazing way we raised $11,000, and we used all that money to buy tons of soundproofing and sheetrock, and I think 2 cameras, tons of microphones, like a whole bunch of gear, and set up this very, very cool recording studio and production space in our 2-story duplex in Williamsburg, and the whole downstairs basement was set up for recording. It was super cool. It was yeah, it had to, obviously it was very DIY because, like, we literally just built it ourselves, and
Right.
none of us are, craftsmen of that sort. But, we were all very, smart and slick with Ableton or whatever we do, and there was great musicians that lived at this place, so we had good instruments. We had a really nice Fender Rhodes that Ivan had. Our buddy Mark had great drums there, and we had all the mics already set up, and it had kind of this casual DIY but comfy casual look, but also super clean and functional, where every musician could just plug in and sit down, and I could just hit record in Ableton, and everything would just go. And so we called it Candid Music Group, and it kind of started off as this production company, but slowly merged into this hang, where some of those other friends I had been making at school that were starting to get into production and, leaning into new stuff, they would just come over and chill with us and
More of like a
work with us.
collective at that point.
Exactly, yeah. It started to become a collective, and those next 5 years of me living out in Brooklyn became a big part of my life, and my I mean, my label essentially, it really was a collective, and it was just a great space for this meetup of, this workspace where, I mean, literally I paid my bills with for the next 5 years just out of this basement, and this money we got to buy some gear, and the skills I was learning on the job, literally, with
Paid training.
Ableton. Yeah, exactly. And then the experience I had before of, learning music and instruments all those years, but before that, just coming together in this unique way where, once again, like, we were just kids out of school. We were stoners, we were just messing around in a basement. We didn't have any formal recording or producing or engineering training, but we had this weird mix of musicianship and we just had some balls with how we used Ableton, and I think people were into that and knew that they could come through and get a really unique product for not that much not
Yeah.
that much bread.
And I'm
And for
sure
us,
a little bit of it, like the benefit was like people would want to come through and be part of this thing that you had going, like this collective that
exactly.
was forming. I think I want to, because we're just talking so much. I don't want to miss out on all the other fun
Oh yeah,
stuff too.
dude.
Like, just fast forward like a little bit, like this idea of the collective, this idea of like being part of this group, like you brought that to the West Coast with you. Did some people like follow you out there, or you had to find a whole new crew when you came back out to the West Coast? Like, how did that start forming?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've been out in LA for 2 years now. So I'm in my second year as a West Coaster. But interestingly, at the same time that this was happening, I also was forming a community out in LA too, going back even to 2010. And this was another random super serendipitous story where this kid that I went to band camp with, when I was 14, 15, many years go by, we lose touch. We haven't talked to each other in 7, 8 years. And I had just gotten into beat making production, and I put up a whole bunch of music on Bandcamp. And this kid, his name's Mike. He probably saw that I put these records out on Facebook and listened to them and liked them. And he messaged me and said, "Hey dude, I love the music you're making. Me and my buddies out in LA just started getting into Ableton and beat making too. We should catch up." And so he hits me up and we catch up, and he tells me that he's going to Chapman University and he's taking a production class there. And he said that him and his friends were doing this thing just for fun where, they would just email some samples to each other, and they had give them like they would give each other an hour to make a beat, a 1-minute beat, and then they would
Yep.
send them to each other and see how they come out. And you pick a tempo and have to use the sample. And he said, "Yeah, we started doing this every week, and now you have the whole week to make the beat, and it's just kind of fun. Let me know if you want in." So I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So he sent me the sample and the tempo, and I made a beat, in an hour or two, and sent it to him. And I think that Tuesday they posted on the YouTube channel, and this was the beginning of a collective that I was part of for many years called Team Supreme.
Yep.
And it was really cool. It was basically just a bunch of kids, a bunch of cool producers, all different styles, super eclectic, all into different things. And every week a sample would get sent around and a tempo was assigned, and you just did your thing. And it was really great practice for working quickly and not overthinking it, but also having some wiggle room and playground, especially in those early days when there wasn't so much genre establishment. It felt very Wild Westy, and we were just trying, weird stuff.
Sure.
But and there's also this nice kind of friendly competitive aspect where, we're all homies, but we're also trying to see, who won the beat tape that week.
Yeah.
So, and it was just a great way to learn from each other from listening to their beats and step your own game up and do it consistently. It was good practice for all those things.
And that ended up growing like way beyond just a few producers emailing each other. That grew into
Yeah.
like a whole thing.
It did. It grew into a whole thing, and we ended up doing, I think, close to 200 of these beat ciphers
Wow.
weekly for a long time, and eventually much later. And it definitely became the launch pad for a lot of us going into our next step. Some of us going off to much bigger things, and then other of us just going on to finding our zones and niche with our fans and our workspaces with what we do best, and helped us all get discovered. We did a documentary with Ableton, I think similar around to the time that I did one with them. And yeah, I mean, great friends were made, friends that I still have to this day, that I kick it with out here. And I think that's probably the most important bit of that. Once again, it's one of those stories where, like, going back to those homies I met at school, some of them I don't talk to more, and some of them I think I'll be friends with for life. And that's probably what matters above anything else. I wouldn't say Team Supreme is active anymore, although we had a great many years, and there was this big community aspect because the beat tapes were open invitation. Anybody could submit, and
Right.
I think we were all one probably helped encourage the, at the time, just blossoming producer community, giving kids like us a platform to do their thing and be seen on the internet. And I think that was probably huge. It was huge for me at the time, and I'm sure for other people as well. But so I don't think Team Supreme is running anymore, but it's a huge part of my musical path in life, and a big inspiration and learning point. And it's the friends I have to this day.
Yeah. It sounds like such a special time and place. So that's really awesome.
Oh yeah.
And I'm a big fan of that documentary that Ableton made, because like it really, it's hard to, with other music scenes, jazz, classical, like even like normal, like regular old rock bands and stuff like that, you get the sense of community a lot because you see people at shows and you see people whatever. And I think it is that idea of the emerging beat scene and the emerging electronic music, like laptop producer scene of like that hadn't really existed yet, and you know, like, what was the scene around that? Is there a community around this? And that just goes to prove that yes, there is indeed community around this, and it is like it's the same thing like as all these other genres and niches, you know.
Yeah.
I want to pivot a little bit because
Do it, do
you
it.
know we teased it at the top and showed off that performance earlier. I think you're one of the most proficient like push users that I've seen, like push players, and like for me, I'm just like a put it in key, stick to like the scale, the diatonic scale, whatever. You're doing all kinds of crazy stuff in chromatic mode, and like I guess it maybe this harkens back to your you know, your classical training. And I actually now I'm wondering like how much of your bass knowledge plays into your knowledge of like working your way around the push. But I'm just curious, and I think a lot of people in the chat are probably curious of like what was the training and what was the work like to get to that level with push?
Cool. That's good questions, and I think you already hit some nice observations. Also, shout out to your push hoodie.
Oh yeah, thanks. This is a 343 Labs hoodie, by the way.
Oh, that's dope.
Push it
I'm a
real
fan.
good. Yeah.
That's dope. And it's push 2, yeah?
Of
Okay,
course, of
that's
course.
sick. All right. Well, yeah, these are great questions, and I started playing push 1. Another random story where somebody from Team Supreme put a push 1 in my lap before one of our shows that we used to do, and I just kind of instantly knew what's up with chromatic mode, and the reason for that is, and you basically just said this when you asked this question, is laid out exactly like a bass, specifically, I guess, an 8-string bass. And I've been playing 7-string bass for a long time, so it really did not feel much different from that. And I've also been playing piano for a long time, and ultimately, the push and chromatic mode is this mix of both. Mostly, it's basically exactly like playing a bass or 8-string guitar, but instead of this, playing with, I guess, 2 hands, it's laid down flat on your lap, and you're playing with the one finger to a note style of a piano.
Yeah.
So another one of these weird, I guess it's that same thing. It's totally random that Ableton came out with this instrument that just so happened to have this feature that acted like a new type of keyboard that they probably borrowed from Roger Lim's Linsterman, and but then it also happened to be exactly the way that I already thought about musical notes in my head just from being a bass player for, at the time, probably already 10ish years. So it's really, to me, well, it's not something I take for granted, but it just kind of lined up that in a sense my whole life I was already thinking the way the push is laid out and kind of already practicing it. That being said, when I first played push and first got one, which was shortly after, um, being who I am, being the dude that I am, I spent the next 6 months just waking up every day and just practicing push for probably 6 hours a day, and not just the piano playing, the keyboard aspect, but I remember having, whole days where it would just be, "Okay, I'm gonna turn the screen off, and I'm just gonna see, if I could, how big of a beat can I make just using push, just touching the buttons on push?" And
Wow.
I would do that. I did that for a long time, and through that really learned the instrument and how to do it. And I had this vision or goal of how close can the flow state of improvising on an instrument like a piano or guitar or bass, how much can it feel like that but with composing a beat? So how much can the compositional building process of building up the loops actually to a listener sound like the beat building? How much can the composition happen in real time
That's
as
awesome.
opposed to
And how
I guess
close could you get, do you think?
probably not crazy close, but pretty close. And it's a concept I've been revisiting lately. I mean, I guess a good example or an attempt at the example was the video you started this interview off with. That was a beat that I made in real time on the spot. I mean, it's stupid simple. It probably had 3 layers, but yeah, it's the idea of how much can composition converge with performance, and
Yeah,
how much can you put an audience in front of you and make the process of producing engaging and entertaining. And
sure.
something I've been getting back into now because I've just been given a lot more opportunities to perform on push now. I've been been asked to do that a lot, and it's cool because I play a lot of instruments and I'm into a lot of different things. So sometimes I'm playing a bunch of drums, sometimes I'm like outside messing around with movement stuff. Sometimes I'm playing guitar, and sometimes the push just stays leaned against the wall for 6 months to a year, and now I'm kind of back into it and revisiting that state, and it's cool. It's an amazing tool for that. Just the keyboard part alone of it, I think. Well, I already see it really picking up in the obviously the Ableton community, but it's really this amazing bridge, especially for musicians coming from guitar or bass or piano to see music in a new way in in this specifically shape-based way, because it's really just about finding and seeing shapes, these little Tetris blocks on the 8x8 grid, and each
Yeah.
one of these shapes is a different sound, a different melody, a different chord, and every interval has its own shape. And once you know a shape, you could just move it anywhere and it'll always be that same shape. So it really is a I can't think of a better analogy than building music through Tetris blocks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the benefit of just being familiar and being proficient on so many tools, so that you can stay inspired in whatever habits you have on one specific tool, whether it's like the push or traditional keyboard, you can always go pick up the other thing and,
Yeah.
gain some inspiration that way. And it still feel refreshed. If the push sits on the wall for a few months or whatever, because you've been rocking the bass or rocking the traditional keys, you can always just go and grab the push like a few months later and be refreshed as soon as like that time comes, as soon as you kind of like are getting a little bit bored or getting a little bit in your habits. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really cool.
I think that's I mean, I don't know. It definitely keeps it interesting for me, but it's never, you never move on fully from something, it's and you never lose what you worked on with that. And I think it's good to diversify and learn new things, especially if you're looking to go back to that state of the beginning of a learning curve where you're basically a beginner and you're just absorbing tons of information and skills, and that's the favorite part for me. I usually choose to learn new skills over trying to get super masterful at one thing, and I recommend that to
Totally.
anybody who's looking to change it up and find new inspiration.
Yeah, adding more and more to your rotation. It's worth saying everybody in chat looks like people are enjoying the interview. So thank you all for tuning in and watching. I've got a link to Jonathan's YouTube channel in the description. So please check that out. Give him a subscribe. There's more performances and instructional stuff where that came from. And if you have any final questions, throw them in chat now. We'll see if we can get them out rapid fire if they make sense with the conversation. But you have a new artist project.
Yeah.
You want to tell me about
So
that?
yeah, of course, man. So, yeah, well, like I said, I'm into a lot of different things and consider myself a very eclectic and expressive musician. And recently, I've been getting more and more into not only songwriting, but going back to my roots as a jazz and soul musician. And I've decided I've started a new project and personal identity under my middle name, which is Charles Jacques. And I've released 5 songs so far on Spotify. And I'm singing, I'm writing songs, I'm playing instruments, I'm layering tons of vocals, I'm playing guitar and live drums, and it's cool, it's different, and it's something I'm still exploring and discovering. And so if you want to hear more of what I'm doing, please check it out, and also follow me on Instagram, which is I am Charles Jacques. That's
Awesome.
Charles and then JACQUES. And I'm definitely posting my music on there and also doing tons of short push-based videos and little live beats and basically the stuff we're talking about. I'm messing around on there. So yeah, if you're curious about any of that, please check it out.
That's great. I'm curious about what led you to want to do a different, artist name, just a different identity, a different artist project. Like what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's someone that was always advised to me. It was advice I received a lot from other producers and musicians I respect a lot, and some of which had the same path of they're really into they're really into making hard trap, but then they also like making, very, very jazzy soul. And they realize that not only is it confusing, I guess maybe for their fans or for themselves, um, to but it's almost like it's a different persona for you. It's a different side of you, and I think we all have this. We're all the same single person, but we're also very complex and
Yeah.
have many dimensions and personalities. And I really like the idea of leaning into both separately with full comfort and not feeling like I need to find some sort of middle ground or compromise between the two. Because on one end, the my side as JNTHN Stein feels very, to me, I always identify him as like zany and intense and and wild and trippy and playful, and Charles Jacques is more more sensual and warm and earthy, and it's been a nice way for me to place the full palette and range of me as an emotional person and an artist from left to right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been fun and liberating to be able to lean into both. And also, I mean, changing your identity, it's it changes the way you feel. I feel like, actors go through this a lot, and I don't know anything or much about acting, but you create these characters, and you want to immerse into it. It's not just changing the way you talk or changing or playing expressively with how you sing or play an instrument. It's how you dress, it's how you carry yourself, it's how you walk, it's the name that you identify and the phonetic sounds of that name that make you feel a certain way. And I mean, ultimately, we're making all this stuff up, although Charles Jacques is my real middle name. But we're just making this up as we go. We're trying to. That's kind of what it is to be an artist. We're just making stuff up out of thin air. We're creating through the raw willpower of imagination. And so just run with it, have fun with it, and don't hold back, and take it in any direction that you want that brings you the most joy and makes you the happiest.
Perfect words to end on. Hey, but you're going to be on 343 TV tomorrow, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. What's the show about tomorrow?
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be along the lines of what we were getting into. It's gonna be simple. I'm gonna have the push set up, and I'm gonna start from scratch with nothing loaded up, and I'm just gonna make a beat on push, and we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. You all should tune into that, youtube.com/343 labs. That'll be live tomorrow at the same time as this show. And we're live pretty much every single day with all different shows. So JNTHN's going to be on tomorrow. Abe Duque does the news and does different electronic music interviews, stuff on Fridays. John Selway's Techno Saturdays is always a good time. So make sure you're subscribed over there. Go follow JNTHN's channel. Make sure you go subscribe to his artist project, Charles Jacques, on Instagram. I am Charles Jacques, right?
Mhm.
Perfect. Go follow all those things. And don't forget that the 343 Labs Beat Battle is happening and entries are due on Thursday. You can find more info on the 343 Labs YouTube channel or the website, or if the Discord, if you're not in there yet. That's going to be it. JNTHN, thank you so much. Very motivating interview, very inspiring. I think people in the chat, it seems like folks are able to take a lot. Mystic Moth says, thanks for the insightful interview. So it seems like people are taking a lot from this. Thank you for taking the time and having this conversation. It was great to hear your experience.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick, and it's my pleasure to hang and talk with y'all. Thanks, everybody.
For sure. All right, everybody. This has been TAETRO with TAETRO Talks. We're here every Tuesday, 10 a.m. PST. Make sure you tune in next week for another interview. Have a good one. That's going to be it.